Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. In the summer of 2024, a quiet coastal town on the east coast of the US found itself thrust into the spotlight by a crime that would shake its residents for months. A young woman lost her life in broad daylight, her final calls filled with panic and despair. Law enforcement launched a manhunt for a man with a clouded past. His name soon echoed across the nation. With each new clue, the picture grew increasingly nightmarish. What began as a routine criminal case unraveled into a tale of jealousy, aggressive behavior, fleeing, and secrets hidden within the very walls of a home that concealed a monstrous truth. Maxwell Johnston had long been known to law enforcement long before his name became entwined with tragedy. Raised in a troubled environment, he became involved early on in street conflicts. As a teen, he joined the notorious Bloods Street Crew, known across the U.S. for their violence and deep ties to the trade of forbidden substances. For Maxwell, this group offered a source of belonging and a descent from which there was no return. By age 20, Maxwell struggled with addiction and made his living through the illegal dealing of forbidden substances. His criminal record, preserved in police files, was peppered with incidents tied to such activity. Between 2009 and 2015, he was arrested 4 separate times, each stint ending with his release, only to return more hardened and confident than before. His final conviction carried a sentence of 8 years behind bars, the harshest of them all. While incarcerated, Maxwell learned how to endure a brutal prison system, which only hardened his already aggressive demeanor. He was released on parole in 2022, but nothing had changed. The following year, he violated the terms of his release and found himself back behind bars. When he was released again in 2023, he slipped back into his old circle, fully transformed into someone dangerous and unpredictable. His paranoia intensified. He saw threats everywhere and treated any resistance as a provocation. Women who crossed his path faced a particular danger, as his urge for control often escalated into physical aggression. Gabriela Caroleo's path, however, had been completely different. Born and raised in New Jersey, she endured domestic aggression from a young age. Her father terrorized the household, instilling a climate of fear. Her sister Anna was her only anchor. Together, they learned to endure the father's eruptions, finding solace in each other's presence. That shared experience of pain forged a bond so strong that it became their most steadfast friendship. As Gabriela grew older, she refused to let her past break her spirit. To those around her, she was known as a bright, witty young woman with a sharp sense of humor. She had the ability to fill a room with laughter, loved joking around, and stood by her friends. Her style blended modern urban vibes with self-reliance, piercings, tattoos, streetwear, and a music taste that ranged from rap and R&B to country. Above all, she had a passion for Nike sneakers, especially Air Jordans, which were her absolute favorites. The most important person in Gabriela's life was her young son Calvin, born in 2021. She was raising him on her own, but never felt truly alone. Her mother and sister were always by her side. Gabriela worked hard to balance her job and parenting, making sure Calvin grew up surrounded by warmth and care. Despite the challenges, she remained the heart of the family, full of energy and joy. These two lives were never meant to intersect. Maxwell, whose life was marked by aggressive behavior and crime, and Gabriela, striving to build a peaceful, stable life for herself and her son, came from completely different worlds. Their meeting would become a tragic collision between chaos and calm. He was seeking power and control. She longed for love and peace. That contrast would ultimately shape the devastating events to come. Gabriella and Maxwell met in 2023, not long after Johnston was released from custody. Their encounter wasn't the result of mutual friends or a long-standing connection. He entered her life unexpectedly, and things progressed quickly. At first, it seemed like a casual fling. Maxwell's charisma, smooth talk, and air of confidence created a false sense of attraction. Gabriella, someone who naturally trusted others and looked for the good in people, agreed to spend time with him. But the relationship was brief and unstable. Signs of hostility and aggression appeared within the first few weeks. Maxwell, who was used to having the upper hand, demanded control and took any disagreement as a personal insult. He didn't know how to let go and couldn't accept someone else's choices. For Gabriella, who valued her independence, it became a painful experience. The relationship ended quickly, but the story didn't. After their breakup, Johnston didn't back off. He began to pressure her, calling, messaging, and even showing signs of surveillance. Every attempt she made to distance herself was taken by him as a challenge. His behavior revealed the same paranoia that had once terrified even his own family. He saw threats where there were none, blaming Gabriella for the fears that haunted him. What made things even more concerning was that the aggression had begun before the breakup was final. During their short time together, Maxwell had already raised his hand against her more than once. Gabriella understood how dangerous he was. She had seen his violent outbursts firsthand. So when he turned their breakup into a reason to make threats, her fear was very real. By the summer of 2024, that fear had reached its peak. In June, just days before the tragic events, Gabriella confided in her loved ones, telling them plainly that she feared for her life. Her family already knew about his criminal background, but even they couldn't imagine how serious things would become. To her mother and sister, one thing was clear. Gabriella wasn't the type to exaggerate. If she said she was in danger, then something was truly wrong. Despite her family's pleas to be cautious, she couldn't fully escape his attention. Maxwell always found ways to make his presence known, doing just enough to instill fear and remind her he still held power. Gabriella told her family that he wouldn't leave her alone and that every time he showed up, it felt like a threat. That morning in New Jersey started out like any typical summer day. The sun was already high, the heat could be felt early, and the streets were filled with people going about their routines. For Gabriella Caroleo, there was nothing unusual. She was walking down the street, approaching an intersection, when a white Honda Pilot suddenly pulled up in front of her. Behind the wheel was Maxwell Johnston, her worst fear. He stepped out of the vehicle and immediately became aggressive. There was no attempt at conversation. His actions were entirely focused on intimidation and physical confrontation. Johnston attacked her right there in broad daylight. Gabriella, realizing the danger she was in, managed to grab her phone and called her mother first. The only words that came through the receiver were, "He attacked me. Call the police." Those were the last words her mother ever heard from her. Minutes later, her mother tried to call back, but all she could hear was shouting. It was Johnston's voice, and the rage in it came through loud and clear. Gabriella didn't have a chance to get away, and the attack escalated into a fatal act. Her next call was made to emergency services. The operator heard that a weapon had been used against her. Then came the sound of a gunshot. Gabriella had been shot in the side, the bullet damaging her ribs and hitting vital organs, including her spine. Despite the severity of her injuries, which were incompatible with survival, she remained conscious and was able to speak. She lay on the sidewalk, bleeding, as a passerby stopped to help. In those final moments, she told him the name of her attacker and gave a detailed description of his vehicle, its color and license plate number. First responders arrived quickly and assessed her condition as critical. To save time, they decided to airlift her. Gabriella was flown to the nearest major medical center where trauma teams performed emergency procedures, stopping the bleeding, trying to restore her breathing, and stabilizing her heart. Everything possible under those circumstances was done. However, despite their efforts, the injuries were too severe. Later that same evening, doctors delivered the heartbreaking news to her family. Gabriela Caroleo had passed away. The official cause was a gunshot wound with extensive internal damage. Gabriela's death was the result of several converging factors: Johnston's relentless behavior, the limited time for law enforcement to intervene, and the inability to protect her when she needed it most. The date, June 27, 2024, remains seared into her family's memory as the day her fears were tragically confirmed. News of Gabriela Caroleo's death devastated those who loved her. Her mother couldn't grasp the reality that the daughter she'd spoken to that very morning on the phone would never come home again. Her sister Anna, who had shared every hardship with Gabriela since childhood, was left without the person closest to her. But the most profound impact was felt by 3-year-old Calvin. He lost the woman who had been his primary source of love and care. He was too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, but the adults around him knew exactly what her absence meant. His life would now move forward without the one person who mattered to him more than anyone else. While Gabriela's loved ones were preparing for her funeral, the case took an unexpected turn. Maxwell Johnston's parents voluntarily came forward to speak with the police. His mother had begun to suspect that her son was involved in the crime and explained that his behavior had recently become deeply concerning. According to her, Maxwell had developed an obsessive belief about Gabriela, claiming she was stalking him and trying to hurt him. His family knew these claims didn't reflect reality, but they couldn't ignore the state of his mental health. On the day of the incident, his mother spoke to him by phone. The conversation struck her as disturbing. He kept repeating that he didn't want to go back to prison, and his speech was erratic and anxious. After that call, they lost contact with him. His father also confirmed that Maxwell had been acting irrationally and said things that sounded like a final goodbye. Gabriela's funeral was the most painful moment for her family. It was a day where grief mixed with a deep sense of helplessness. Attending the ceremony were not only friends and relatives, but also law enforcement officers. Their presence was meant to ensure the safety of the family, because the person responsible was still at large. During the service, something happened that intensified the emotional weight of the day. Anna, Gabriela's sister, received a message from Maxwell. In it, he mentioned that he knew the police were guarding the family. That meant he was nearby, or at the very least, monitoring the situation. The fact that he reached out on the day of the funeral felt like yet another form of intimidation. The shock of receiving that message deepened the already overwhelming sorrow. The family wasn't just mourning. They were forced to face the reality that the man responsible was still free and still interfering in their lives. After Gabriela Caroleo's passing, authorities immediately focused their efforts on locating Maxwell Johnston. Gabriela herself had named him before she lost consciousness, leaving no doubt about his involvement. But capturing him was far from easy. Johnston knew how to stay hidden, and his connections in the criminal world helped him stay ahead of the law. The first major breakthrough came when police found the white Honda Pilot in Newark. There were no signs of a struggle inside, which led investigators to believe he had abandoned it willingly. This supported their theory that Johnston was intentionally switching vehicles to confuse law enforcement. Though he didn't stay in Newark for long, officers learned that he had a contact there, someone he'd met during his time in custody. When police visited that address, they confirmed Johnston had been there, but he'd already moved on. Next came a tip from a resident in Howell who reported seeing a man matching Johnston's description in a nearby house. But by the time officers arrived, he was gone again. This scenario would repeat itself several times. Police would receive leads, but Johnston managed to stay one step ahead, constantly relocating and relying on people from his past. A clearer picture began to emerge. This wasn't someone acting randomly. He was fully aware that he was being hunted and carefully chose homes where he could hide temporarily. Most of these locations belonged to people he'd met while incarcerated. Those ties proved especially dependable, as individuals with shared criminal backgrounds often had reasons to protect each other and avoid contact with law enforcement. But despite all his precautions, Johnston made a mistake. At one of the houses, he left behind a phone. Forensics experts analyzed the device and managed to recover data pointing to his next planned hideout. That's how they zeroed in on an area near Toms River, where a woman named Elizabeth Mascarelli, known among locals as Liz Grimm, was believed to be sheltering him. The series of misleading trails and temporary hideouts finally led to a precise breakthrough. The authorities had identified the exact location where Maxwell Johnston was hiding. For law enforcement, this was a major turning point. They no longer had to chase vague leads. They now had a confirmed address where the suspect was holed up with a woman who had chosen to help him avoid justice. 29-year-old Elizabeth Mascarelli was fully aware that she was harboring a man suspected of a violent crime. She knowingly provided him with everything he needed to stay hidden. The two spent 4 days together in her room, rarely leaving. Throughout that time, Johnston remained armed and kept his firearm close at all times. Police surrounded the house, but didn't rush in immediately. They first attempted negotiations, but the pair inside refused to come out. Johnston positioned himself by the window and occasionally displayed his weapon, creating a tense atmosphere. The situation escalated sharply when he opened fire on law enforcement. In response, officers returned fire and deployed flashbang grenades in an attempt to force them to surrender. But rather than panic or try to de-escalate, the couple reacted disturbingly, as if they were enjoying the chaos. The standoff dragged on for nearly 7 hours. Johnston and Mascarelli didn't just fire back, they seemed to disregard the danger completely. In the middle of the gunfire, they were reportedly physically intimate, with Mascarelli filming parts of the standoff on her phone. Images and videos began appearing on her Instagram account. One showed them unclothed, with Johnston making a gesture that mimicked a shot to the head. Another showed Mascarelli licking the barrel of the gun while smirking at the camera. These disturbing posts quickly went viral before her account was taken down. To law enforcement, it was further confirmation that they were dealing with individuals completely detached from any moral boundaries. Nearby residents heard the continuous gunfire and explosions from the flashbangs. Aside from Johnston and Mascarelli, 3 others surrendered during the siege: Daniel Bolstad and 2 individuals, both named Jared. They exited the home peacefully and were immediately taken into custody. Meanwhile, the main targets remained inside. Attempts to flush them out with gas failed. Johnston kept firing, at one point striking a police shield. Tensions remained high late into the evening. It wasn't until the tactical team intensified pressure that Mascarelli finally emerged. She had a visible injury on her head from one of the flashbangs and was immediately detained and taken to a medical facility. After her surrender, police deployed a drone into the house to assess the situation. The camera captured Johnston's body. He had ended his own life, mirroring the gesture he had shown in his earlier photos. His death marked the end of the manhunt, but not the end of the investigation. Once the standoff in Toms River ended and Elizabeth Mascarelli was in custody, investigators gained access to the house that had served as the criminals' hideout. Inside, they were met with a disturbing scene. The space was in total disarray. Items strewn everywhere, bloodstains covering the floors and walls. A heavy, lingering odor filled the air, turning the home into a haunting reminder of the violence that had unfolded within. During the search, police recovered several phones. One of them, belonging to Elizabeth Mascarelli, contained images that dramatically shifted the direction of the investigation. On the device were photos of a deceased man, later identified as 56-year-old Cary Rollason, the owner of the house. The images depicted disturbing levels of violence. In one, Johnston posed next to the body, making a gesture as if firing a gun to the head. In another, Mascarelli smiled while holding an axe, lodged in the victim's chest. These photos weren't taken for documentation. They appeared to be displays of cruelty and gratification. To investigators, it was clear. The killing of Rollason had been followed by a deliberate act of desecration. Mascarelli and Johnston didn't just end a life, they mocked it afterward. After analyzing the phone's contents, forensic teams returned to examine the crime scene more thoroughly. All signs pointed to that very location as the place where Cary suffered fatal injuries. But the discovery was only the beginning. Near the house, officers found a metal incinerator. Inside it were the remnants of burned items, blood-stained fabric, and an axe bearing the victim's DNA. It was clear the suspects had attempted to destroy evidence, but failed to eliminate it completely. Further developments came after questioning one of the individuals taken into custody, Danielle Bolstad. During her interview, she disclosed the location of remains. Officers were led to a wooded area about 100 yards from the scene. There, they found large black plastic bags containing dismembered human remains, divided into 8 separate parts. Nearby were a shovel, a blanket, and a metal rod, items believed to have been used in the dismemberment and transport of the body. Medical examiners confirmed that Rollason died from gunshot wounds, followed by blunt force trauma to the head. Only after that was the body dismembered. Experts noted that the dismemberment wasn't random. It was done deliberately and with planning. The images found on Mascarelli's phone reinforced this conclusion. The individuals involved didn't just acknowledge what they had done, they appeared to want to preserve it. Unlike Gabriella Caroleo, Cary Rollason didn't have close loved ones who could speak for him after the tragedy. A solitary man who, by 56, had lost all immediate family and had no ongoing connection to distant relatives, he lived in near total isolation. That's likely why the circumstances surrounding his death went unnoticed for so long. The house that would later become the scene of a tragic discovery had been occupied by Danielle Bolstad and 2 men named Jared, Palumbo, and Crisack. Eventually, Johnston and Mascarelli joined them. Investigators believe the residence functioned as a type of shared living arrangement centered around the use and storage of forbidden substances. Although there's no direct evidence linking Cary Rollason himself to this activity, it appears his home had become a refuge for those involved in that world. Testimonies from the residents shed light on what life inside the house was like. They described an environment steeped in fear. Maxwell Johnston kept a firearm close at all times and made no secret of his readiness to use it. Witnesses recalled how he would sometimes aim it at others in the house, then laugh as if it were all a twisted game. Mascarelli mirrored his behavior. The photos recovered from Mascarelli's phone helped illustrate the psychological pressure others in the house endured. Bolstad and Palumbo later admitted they were afraid not only for themselves, but also feared they might be next. Each resident played a different role. Danielle Bolstad, a 42-year-old woman, became involved in helping conceal evidence after the crime. Jared Palumbo, 36, chose to cooperate with investigators and gave a detailed account of what had happened. The third occupant, Jared Crisack, took the opposite approach, denying any involvement, even though evidence suggested he had assisted in dismembering the body and cleaning the scene. Cary himself was not viewed as a threat by neighbors. He was described as a quiet, introverted man who may have been too trusting of strangers. It was this very trust that brought danger into his home. Unlike the others, he had no criminal background and showed no signs of aggression. The fear described by the others wasn't an exaggeration. There was an atmosphere of constant surveillance in the house. Johnston monitored everyone's movements, checked who was coming and going, and used his weapon to issue threats. For Bolstad and Palumbo, this created a paralyzing sense of control, and they later explained that it was the main reason they hadn't reached out to law enforcement sooner. Ultimately, the residents' experiences revealed another layer to the story. Beneath the high-profile manhunt and dramatic standoff was a quieter, ongoing nightmare. According to Jared Palumbo, he and Jared Krisak were in the basement at the time Carrie Rollison was killed. They heard 3 gunshots, and shortly afterward, Johnston entered and told them to leave the house immediately. As they made their way upstairs, they saw Rollison's body lying on the floor. Palumbo insisted it was Mascarelli who had pulled the trigger, though Johnston had been standing nearby. That detail shifted the direction of the investigation and reshaped the understanding of each individual's role within the group. One particularly disturbing detail emphasized by Jared Palumbo involved what happened immediately after the killing. Instead of covering their tracks or discussing what to do with the body, the group went to McDonald's. They ordered food and ate calmly, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. This behavior highlighted just how distorted their perception of reality had become. A man had just been killed, yet some members of the group acted as though it were just another day. The next phase began, the dismemberment of the body. According to Palumbo, neither he nor Danielle Bolstad were allowed to be part of that process. He stated directly that it was Maxwell Johnston, Elizabeth Mascarelli, and Jared Krisak who divided the remains. This claim was later supported by physical evidence, the tools used, the pattern of blood traces, and the way the body had been packaged. Palumbo said he only witnessed the aftermath, black plastic bags being prepared for removal. Covering up the crime required the involvement of everyone in the house, but their roles varied. Danielle Bolstad and Palumbo were brought in to help transport the remains. In their own statements, Palumbo admitted to carrying the bags from the basement to the upper floor, while Bolstad loaded them into her vehicle. She then accompanied Johnston and Mascarelli to dispose of the bags in a wooded area. Palumbo, at that point, no longer participated. Palumbo's testimony became critical to the investigation. It allowed authorities to move beyond the initial theory that Johnston alone was responsible for the second killing. His account helped build separate charges for each person involved based on their specific roles. The trial that followed was the result of months of investigation. The primary defendant was Elizabeth Mascarelli. In court, she pleaded guilty and expressed remorse. She repeatedly acknowledged the horrific nature of her actions, but her legal defense tried to paint her not only as a perpetrator, but also as someone under intense psychological pressure from Johnston. Her attorney argued that she had acted under threats from an armed man, and Mascarelli herself claimed she had lived in constant fear for her life and her son's safety. Despite her expressions of regret, the facts of the case weighed heavily against her. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with a minimum of 85% of the term to be served, followed by an additional 5 years of supervised release. Jared Krisak's case was addressed separately. While he initially admitted to his involvement, he attempted to change his account in court, denying participation in the dismemberment. However, the court pointed out inconsistencies. Upon arrest, he had described details of the process, including the use of a metal bar to separate joints. His claim of being an unwilling bystander was not supported by the evidence. The court found him guilty of abuse of a corpse and evidence tampering, sentencing him to 8 years in prison. The cases of Danielle Bolstad and Jared Palumbo were handled separately. A key factor in both was their early cooperation with investigators. Their testimony allowed law enforcement to piece together the sequence of events and identify who had taken the lead in specific actions. The court acknowledged that without their statements, Elizabeth Mascarelli might have received a more lenient sentence, and Jared Krycak's role might have remained undiscovered. Both were ultimately sentenced without incarceration. Palumbo, who had no prior criminal record, received 18 months of supervised probation and was required to complete a rehabilitation program. Bolstad, who did have a previous conviction, was given a stricter sentence, approximately 2 years of probation, along with a requirement to cooperate with probation officers throughout. After Gabriella's passing, care for 3-year-old Calvin fell to her maternal family. While official guardianship documents were not made public, social media posts suggested that he was living full-time with his grandmother and Aunt Anna. Their pages showed photos of walks, family gatherings, and moments of daily life. To help Calvin feel safe and secure, they established a consistent daily routine, which included quality time with loved ones and maintaining items that reminded him of his mother. The family worked hard to shield him from discussions about the tragedy and instead focused on everyday activities that offered comfort and stability. Instead of focusing on words, Gabriella's memory is kept alive through meaningful gestures. A memorial plaque was placed at the location where her life was taken. Her family visits the site regularly, bringing flowers and items in purple, her favorite color. On special days, especially Mother's Day, Anna and the grandmother bring Calvin there. For the adults, it's a way to honor Gabriella's memory. For Calvin, it's a comforting ritual that shows his mom is still remembered and cherished, even in her absence. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.